And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC basketball podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are once again talking about Cavs drama. I mean, again, this drama it's through the roof. Like there's so many different headlines about the Cavs, and it's all bad news. That's all it has been for the Cavs recently, and it's not looking good for them. I'm just adjusting the light in the background. Don't mind me, but I mean, I will say it's very good for me because now I actually have like some other things to talk about. But I am getting a little bit fed up with how much drama there is around the Cavs team, especially like still now after they fired their head coach, because this drama, it's still like talking about their head coach and the problems that JB Bickerstaff sort of had throughout the Cavs with the Cavs and its locker room. So Marcus Morris, obviously an NBA veteran, he was on the Cleveland Cavaliers. He recently participated on the podcast Run It Back, and he said on the podcast that there was a disconnect between the Cleveland Cavaliers players and head coach JB Bickerstaff. So if you guys remember from the previous podcast that I did, in the third segment of the last live show that I did and the last podcast that I did, I said that Donovan Mitchell was one of the players that had a disconnect with JB Bickerstaff and just didn't agree with the coaching methods and didn't think that, him as a coach would lead the Cavaliers far. And I thought it was just him. I thought it was just Donovan Mitchell that was saying this, and the reason why the Cavs were decided to fire their head coach JB Bickerstaff was because of Donovan Mitchell and his disconnect with the coach. Because when you're when you're a team and your star player doesn't have the same agreements as the coach, you can do one of two things. One, get rid of that star player. Two, get rid of the coach. And 9 times out of 10, the organization decides to get rid of the coach and get a new one. Now, I can't really give you the exact number of how many times it's worked out for them, but at the end of the day, I thought that this decision was literally just Donovan Mitchell, influenced by Donovan Mitchell, but I was wrong, and we have more confirmation that it's not just him that believed that JB Bickerstaff was an incompetent coach. So, Morris, he joined the Cavs in March. He appeared in 12 games during the regular season and 9 games in the postseason. And as I said before on the podcast, Bickerstaff went 170 to 59 in the excuse me, in the regular season, and 6 out of 11 in the postseason. He only won 6 games in the postseason, so unfortunate for him. And again, he lost to Boston in the second round of the playoffs this year in 5 games. So according to the NBA reporter Jason Lloyd, the Cavaliers star, like Donovan, he was aggravated with Bickerstaff's tactics and strategies. And the quote is, yes, Donovan Mitchell was one of those aggravated by some of Bickerstaff's tactics and strategies. Lloyd wrote, he wasn't alone, but a locker room follows its star. If Mitchell had Bickerstaff's back, everyone else would fall in line. When he didn't, the others fell into that line too. So it would seem that, again, it's still influenced by Donovan Mitchell and his opinions towards the coach. It's sort of like the mentality of just follow the leader, if that makes sense, which is a little bit, it makes total sense, because if your best player on your team isn't happy with the coach, then you're going to agree with your best player. But at the same time, I feel like people could have thoughts for themselves without seeming to follow like a bandwagon. And I'm very surprised that he says that it's because of Mitchell, where Morris is saying that it's not just Mitchell, it was everybody in the locker room that had a problem. And another quote here is, I heard complaints that Bickerstaff was too hands-on, that he wanted to be in control of everything at practices and shoot-arounds. Players grumbled about playing time, either too much or too little. And hold on a second, too much? The players are complaining about too much playing time? Really? I'm sorry, but in my opinion, with that mentality, you're not going to win anything, no matter what coach you have. the way that this league has turned out, it's turned out so soft to me. I mean, if this was 2010 or like in 2000, you'd have players begging to be in the game off. Like if this was Kobe, you'd have him begging to be in the game for 48 minutes straight, and him being on the bench is just agony. And now we have people complaining that they're playing for too long. Are you serious? Like, that's the mentality that we're going into this. I think that's incredibly weak. I mean, and obviously, like, this is coming from a New York fan where Josh Hart is used to playing like 46, 48 minutes, and all power to Josh Hart and his quote and because he did say in a post game that the real workers are the ones that are working at a 9-to-5 job. I'm just playing a basketball game. The least I could do is play 48 minutes. That's not exactly what he said. Like, don't quote me on that. That's not exactly what he said. But it's more or less like along the lines of what he said in the post-game interview. And I'm very surprised that there are complaints about people playing too much. Like, how is it? What? But I digress. So, players grumbled about their playing time, too much or too little. Again, all fairly ordinary and pedantic. That, at least, I have no idea what that word means. I'm not even going to lie to you. The most damning criticism, this is a quote, so pardon me for that language, and the one that sticks is the second half fade most of his teams here experience. So injuries can be blamed for part of it, but he has to wear that one. Now, I don't know exactly what he means by that, but I'm assuming he's talking about like the second half collapse that the teams would experience in some of these games where, like, they would go in and it would seem like they're playing really well, but towards the second half they just blow it. And part of it is the fault of the players, and the other part is, of course, the fault of the coach and the methods that he uses. But I'm not going to blame either side, because it's like I have no idea what's going on with this Cavs locker room now, and I also have no idea what coach they're planning on bringing to help them win a championship, because that's the ultimate goal for this Cavs team. And Mitchell is under contract for the next season, and he has a $37 million player option for 2025 and 2026. He is eligible to sign a 4-year, $208 million extension this summer. And the Golden State Warriors assistant Kenny Atkinson and the New Orleans Pelicans assistant James Borrego are considered leading candidates to become the next head coach for the Cavs. So Atkinson, he coached the Brooklyn Nets and went 118-170 in the regular season and 1-4 in the playoffs. And I mean, all these coaches, they're just the coaches that they have next in line are just as mediocre, if not worse, than the previous coach that they had. I mean, as a Nets fan, and the Atkinson as a coach, no, get him away from me. And meanwhile, Borrego, as a head coach, he was 148-183 with the Magic and the Charlotte Hornets. So, again, like, all of these records, they're not as good or even at, like, on par with JB Bickerstaff's record with the Cavs. But at the same time, you still need, like, a new formula, because if the players aren't happy with the coach, then the players aren't going to play well. Players don't play well, then you're back to square one with Cleveland. And Cleveland does not want to go back to square one where they were in the absolute worst position possible, where it seemed like they were going to be nothing without LeBron James several times, actually. I mean, since 1993, that was the last time that the Cavs made it to the second round. 1993, not counting this previous season. So, they do not want to go back there. But with that, we are out of time for this third segment. So now I will go ahead and go into the fourth segment, where I talk about realistic and dream off-season targets for certain teams. And I will be right back after this short break, so be sure to stay tuned for that.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC. to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.